My husband claimed he was working late. But when I showed up at his office, the lights were off. Suspicious, I tracked his location, a luxury hotel. I drove there, heart pounding, and knocked on a room door. A woman opened it in a silk robe. "Can I help you?" She smirked. Then my husband appeared behind her, bare-chested. His smile faded. I can explain." I smiled coldly. "No need. I'm not here to beg." I turned to the concierge and handed him a folder. "I'd like to book this room. For my divorce celebration." The look on his face was priceless. "I don't even know how to start this. My hands are still shaking. My brain is still trying to process what happened. I knew something was off for months. It started small. A missed text here. A late night at the office there. Then it became more frequent. "I have a big project, babe. I'm swamped, I'll be home late. Don't wait up for me." At first, I believed him. Why wouldn't I? We had been together for 10 years, married for 6. He was my best friend. The person I built a life with. But something changed. He started guarding his phone. If I walked into the room, he would tilt the screen away. He set new passwords. He used to be glued to me when he got home, but now, it felt like I was living with a stranger. Still, I told myself I was overthinking. That I was being paranoid. Until last night. It was around 9 p.m. He had texted earlier saying he had to stay late again. I was on the couch, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, when I remembered we still had each other's locations turned on. It was something we set up years ago, mainly for safety. I don't usually check it. I never had a reason to. But something made me look. He wasn't at the office. He was at the Langham. For those who don't know, the Langham isn't just some random hotel. It's a 5-star, luxury hotel downtown. Not the kind of place you go for a work meeting. Not the kind of place you end up by accident. I felt sick. My whole body went cold. I stared at my phone for what felt like forever. My first thought was denial. Maybe he's meeting a client. Maybe it's an after-hours work event. Maybe there's an innocent reason. But I knew better. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my keys and left. The drive there was a blur. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. By the time I pulled up to the hotel, I could barely breathe. I stepped inside. The lobby was beautiful, tall ceilings, marble floors, soft piano music playing in the background. It smelled like expensive cologne and fresh flowers. I walked straight to the front desk, trying to keep my face neutral. "Hi, I think my husband is staying here. I just wanted to surprise him." I forced a small smile. "Could you tell me what room he's in?" The concierge gave me a polite but firm look. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can't give out guest information." I expected that. What I didn't expect was to see his name on the guest check-in screen sitting on the counter. And right next to his? A woman's name. My stomach flipped. My vision blurred at the edges. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. I forced myself to stay calm. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and nodded. "Right, of course. Thanks anyway." Then I turned and walked straight to the elevators. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have a plan. But I needed to see it. I needed to know. I hit the button for the 15th floor. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked foreign, wide eyes, clenched jaw, breath shallow and uneven. When the doors opened, I stepped into the hallway. It was quiet. Soft yellow lighting. Plush carpet. I found the room number. I stood there for a second, just staring at the door. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might pass out. My fingers were tingling. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me. Then I knocked. Seconds passed. Then footsteps. The door cracked open. A woman stood there. She was wrapped in a silk robe, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She looked at me like I was an inconvenience. Her lips curled into a smirk. "Can I help you?" My ears were ringing. My body felt like it was full of static. Then I saw him. My husband. Bare-chested. Hair messy. He was behind her, laughing at something, until he saw me. His entire face changed. Shock. Guilt. Panic. I can explain, he stammered. I didn't move. Didn't blink. The woman looked between us, then rolled her eyes. Oh, for fuck's sake, just tell her. Silence stretched. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. And I just stood there. Watching. Waiting. I stared at him, at her, at the whole disgusting scene in front of me. The woman in the silk robe sighed dramatically and leaned against the doorframe, like she was bored. Like this was an inconvenience to her. You're his wife, huh? She smirked. Figured you'd show up eventually. Her words hit me like a slap. Eventually? How long had this been going on? I turned back to my husband, who was standing there like a deer in headlights. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. What? I said, my voice eerily calm. Nothing to say? He ran a hand through his messy hair. It's not what it looks like. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Not what it looks like. The classic line. The go-to excuse. I took a slow step forward. Then what is it? I asked. Explain it to me. He swallowed hard. His eyes darted between me and the woman, who just crossed her arms and shook her head. She already knows, she said. You don't have to keep pretending. That made something snap inside me. I turned to her, feeling my pulse hammer in my ears. You knew he was married? She shrugged. Of course I did. I blinked. And you're just, okay with that? She smiled. Sweetheart, if I cared about that, I wouldn't be standing here right now. A cold rage flooded my veins. I turned back to my husband. How long? He hesitated. How long? I demanded. A few months, he mumbled. I sucked in a breath. The walls felt like they were closing in. A few months. While I had been cooking him dinner, folding his laundry, worrying when he came home late, he had been here. In places like this. With her. I felt sick. I should have screamed. I should have thrown something. But instead, I just stood there, cold and still. You're disgusting, I finally said. He flinched like I had hit him. The woman, on the other hand, just laughed. Oh, this is fun, she said, leaning against the doorframe. I have to say, I was expecting more tears. I clenched my fists. You think this is funny? I asked, my voice sharp as glass. She tilted her head, looking me up and down. I think it's funny that you thought he was faithful. That did it. Before I could stop myself, my hand shot out. Not to hit her. No, that would have been too easy. Instead, I reached forward and yanked the silk robe off her shoulder. And that's when I saw it. A necklace. Not just any necklace. My necklace. A delicate gold chain with a tiny diamond pendant, the one my husband gave me on our anniversary last year. The air left my lungs. My hand started shaking. She saw my face and glanced down. Oh, she said, touching the necklace. Yeah. He gave me this a few weeks ago. Cute, huh? I turned back to my husband, my vision blurring at the edges. You gave her my necklace? I whispered. He opened his mouth. Closed it. And for the first time I saw it. The truth. Not just that he had cheated. Not just that he had lied. But that he had never really loved me. And suddenly, I wasn't sad anymore. I was done. But I wasn't going to walk away quietly. Oh no. This wasn't over yet. I took a step back, gripping the doorframe to steady myself. My necklace. My damn necklace. The one he had clasped around my neck on our last anniversary, whispering about forever. Now, it was dangling over her collarbone like some cheap souvenir from a vacation I wasn't invited to. I let out a breath and turned my gaze back to him. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice so steady it scared even me. I didn't mean, he stammered, but I held up a hand. Don't, I said. Just, don't. My mind was racing. I wanted to hurt him, not physically, but in the way that stayed. In the way that made sure he'd never forget this moment. That's when an idea hit me. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. What are you doing? He asked, shifting nervously. I didn't answer. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Then I hit call. The phone rang once. Twice. Then, hey, sweetheart. I was just about to call you. Everything okay? My husband's face drained of color. I smiled. Yeah, Dad, I said sweetly. Everything's fine. But I need a favor. Silence. My husband's mouth opened in horror. He knew exactly what was happening. My father. The one person he never wanted to disappoint. The one person whose approval he had spent years trying to earn. And my dad? My dad loved me more than anything in this world. I looked my husband dead in the eye as I spoke. Can you send over your lawyer's number? I think I'm going to need it. I could feel the panic rolling off him in waves. Of course, my dad said, his voice instantly alert. What happened? Oh, nothing much, I said, still staring at my husband. Just found out my husband has been screwing some random woman in a hotel while wearing no shirt and gifting her my jewelry. My dad went dead silent. Then, I'll call you right back. I knew what that meant. It meant war. My husband's face was pure panic. Jesus Christ, why did you call your dad? He hissed, finally stepping toward me. I took a step back. Because you were never scared of hurting me. My voice was cold. But you're scared of him, aren't you? His jaw clenched. He was. My dad had money. Power. Connections. My husband had spent years trying to prove himself, trying to be worthy of the life my father built for me. And now, in one phone call, I had ripped it away from him. I saw the realization dawn on his face. He knew he was screwed. But I wasn't done yet. I turned back to the woman. She had been watching all of this unfold with mild amusement, arms crossed over her silk robe. How's it feel? I asked her. She raised an eyebrow. How's what feel? I tilted my head. To know you weren't special. She laughed, but I saw the flicker of something in her eyes. I don't know what you mean, she said, but there was a waver in her voice. I took a slow step toward her, lowering my voice just enough to make sure my husband heard every word. You think you're the only one? I whispered. Her smirk faltered. What? I turned to my husband. Go on. Tell her. His Adam's apple bobbed. Tell her, baby. Silence. I looked back at the woman. I hate to break it to you, I said, but you're not the first. And you won't be the last. She turned to him sharply. She's lying, right? He didn't answer. Her expression shifted, her confidence cracking like glass. I smiled. Oh honey, I said, stepping back. You thought you were the only one? I gestured to my necklace around her throat. You thought this meant something? She reached up and touched the pendant like it had suddenly burned her skin. She looked at my husband again. Tell me she's lying, she demanded, voice rising. And that's when I saw it. Doubt. Suspicion. A crack in the foundation. It was subtle, but it was there. She wasn't sure anymore. And once that doubt set in, it would never leave. I leaned in slightly. You should check his phone, I whispered. Her face twisted in anger. But not at me. She turned to him. Give me your phone. What? He sputtered. Give me your phone. He hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. She knew. A second later, she shoved past him into the hotel room, snatching up her own phone. You're such a piece of shit, she spat. I can't believe she cut herself off, shaking her head furiously. I just stood there, watching the chaos unfold. Because this? This was better than revenge. This was justice. The moment stretched between us, thick with silence. The other woman, let's just call her Silk Robe, was still clutching my necklace like she could somehow squeeze the meaning out of it. She looked at my husband, her lips curled in disgust, waiting for him to deny it. To tell her that I was lying. But he didn't. Instead, he did what cowards do best. He panicked. Look, he said, hands raised, voice rushed, this is getting out of control. He turned to Silk Robe. She's just trying to get in your head. She's jealous and vindictive and, she threw his phone at his chest. He barely caught it before it hit the floor. Oh, I already checked your phone, baby, she sneered. And guess what? You're a dumbass. My eyebrows shot up. Okay, this was getting good. You didn't just cheat on her, she continued, shoving a manicured finger into his chest. You were screwing around on me too. His face went pale. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't expected that. Silk Robe whipped her head towards me, eyes blazing. Did you know about the third woman? A slow, almost delighted smile spread across my face. No, I said. But I love that I do now. She let out a humorless laugh. This asshole wasn't just lying to you. He was lying to both of us. Probably more. She turned back to him. So, tell me, baby. Who else? He just stood there, mouth opening and closing, looking like an idiot. I can explain. Silk Robe grabbed the champagne bottle from the nightstand and chucked it at him. He yelped and dodged it at the last second. The bottle smashed against the wall, spilling expensive golden liquid down the wallpaper. The sound brought hotel security running. 2 men in suits appeared in the hallway, looking very done with this situation. Sir, one of them said, already exasperated, we're going to have to ask you to. Silk Robe cut him off. Oh, don't sir him, she snapped. Kick his sorry cheating ass out. The guard blinked. I paid for this room, she snapped. He can sleep in the damn hallway. I laughed. I couldn't help it. My husband turned to me, eyes pleading. Please, he said, voice low. Can we just talk? Alone? I tilted my head. Why? So you can lie some more? His jaw tightened. It wasn't like that. Silk Robe and I both turned to him in sync. Oh? I said, crossing my arms. What was it like, then? Yeah, Silk Robe chimed in, because it sure as hell looked like you were screwing both of us behind each other's backs. His nostrils flared. I never meant for it to happen like this. I stared at him. That's your defense? I never meant for it? He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. I love you, okay? He gestured helplessly. I made a mistake. Silk Robe snorted. A mistake? Dude, a mistake is forgetting an anniversary. This is a whole-ass side career. I watched him scramble for words, for anything that would get him out of this. And then, finally, he snapped. You don't get it, he muttered, shaking his head. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? Please. Enlighten us. He turned to me, voice rising. You were always so perfect. I could never do anything right in your eyes. You had your perfect job and your perfect life, and I felt like I was just, he trailed off, but I knew what he was going to say. Not enough. He had always resented the fact that I was more successful. That I made more money. That I was more put together. That's your excuse? I asked, my voice sharp. You felt insecure, so you stuck your dick in someone else? Silk Robe let out a bark of laughter. Oh, honey, she said. You really should have just gone to therapy. His eyes snapped to her, filled with pure hatred. But before he could say anything, another voice cut through the air. A deep, booming voice. My father's voice. Jesus Christ, is this what my daughter married? I turned. And there he was. My father. Flanked by 2 very large men in suits. His face was unreadable. But his eyes? Cold. Calculated. Ruthless. My husband froze. Sir, I don't, my father said, stepping forward. Don't even try. The tension in the room shifted. It was no longer about me, or Silk Robe, or even the affair. It was about power. And my husband? He had just lost all of his. My father exhaled sharply, then turned to me. You okay? I let out a slow breath. Yeah. He nodded, then turned back to my husband. I don't like repeating myself, so I'll make this simple. You are done. My husband swallowed hard. You're cut off. You will return every single cent my daughter ever gave you. You will sign the divorce papers when they arrive. And if you even think about contesting anything? My father smiled. A cold, dangerous smile. Well, he said. You won't like what happens next. My husband visibly paled. I didn't need to know the details. But I knew this, my father was a man who never made empty threats. Silence. Then, Silk Robe sighed dramatically and turned to me. Well, she said, this has been fun. Then, to my absolute delight, she picked up my husband's shirt from the chair, walked to the balcony, and tossed it over the edge. We all watched as it fluttered 15 stories down into the street below. She turned back with a shrug. Guess you'll have to leave shirtless, buddy. I grinned. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt free.